You're listening to our podcast of Nick Ferrari at Breakfast on LBC. This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Nick Ferrari at Breakfast.
Morning, 3 minutes after 7 on Wednesday, June the 23rd. Coming up in this hour now, flu and pneumonia deaths are 10 times higher than COVID. Indeed, if you get all the stats, the statistics, just 1 in 25 deaths now linked to coronavirus. So how much longer will they deny us our freedom? Full coverage of that story. The horrific case in court about an alleged cat killer. That will shock you. I'll give you a listening warning. It's coming up a little bit later. 5 years ago to the day, we all marched off to the polls, which the following morning led to this.
I will do everything I can as Prime Minister to steady the ship over the coming weeks, but I do not think it would be right to try to be the captain that steers our country to its next destination.
Yes, David Cameron resigning the morning after the night before being Brexit, of course. Well done, England. They go through to the next round of the year. It's bad luck, Scotland, a plucky effort. But what of the players who are still benched, won't be able to train? Meanwhile, 2,500 VIPs will be allowed in. It seems a strange set of priorities. We'll look at that. And the TV channel that is probably for sale.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be able to say to you, welcome to Channel 4.
39 years ago, they launched into Countdown. They've been responsible for some great programming. It's a Sin and Big Brother. Accept it whether you like it or not. It was great programming. They're also responsible for Naked Attraction and Embarrassing Bodies. What's its value and why the fight within the TV lovey circles that it's all wrong?
Nick Ferrari at Breakfast. Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Nick Ferrari at Breakfast on LBC.
And I just say, I would laugh like a drain if Rupert Murdoch, who is in town at the moment, was able to buy Channel 4 and he sent his executives into the Channel 4 newsroom. In fact, I would do a day for them without pay. I would just go along and help out on that day. That would be a conversation. Channel 4, for what it's worth, we're looking at that later in the show. Now, the numbers today, which we always start, and it's very relevant because we're about to have a conversation. 1 in 125 deaths linked to coronavirus. Flu and pneumonia, counting now 10 times the death rate. Some hospitals having had no patients for 3 months. But still, although there are headlines hinting at it, we are still in England on lockdown. And in Scotland, well, my heart goes out to you. Nicola Sturgeon delaying your Freedom Day until August the 9th. And you still have to meet targets to get there. But more on that in a moment. Now, the doses, it's a bit difficult to give you because the numbers actually exclude England. So when I tell you that it's only first doses at little over 21,000, your head might be in your hands, but that's only for Wales, Northern Ireland and Scotland, and the same second doses. So should we just tell you where the infections are, I think? Because, as you may have heard already on the LBC News Bulletins, there was a glitch with the NHS data. So new infections, let's move straight to that, 11,625. That's up 31 percentage points, which is entirely consistent with this week in that rolling 7-day average. There have been an additional 27 deaths, taking the total number of fatalities or deaths to 128,008. And those figures are accurate. They are for the whole of the United Kingdom. And, of course, sympathies if your lives are touched with that at this time. And on that story and on the feeling in some of the newspapers today, the headlines, blueprint for liftoff. What's the other excited one? I think it's this one here, isn't it? Here we go. The face masks and distance rules will go on July the 19th. What is the reality, particularly with reference to these other figures? LBC's political editor, Thea Ashwood, drills down into the details. Thea.
Social distancing restrictions remain in place. We still have to wear face coverings in shops and on public transport. And, of course, theatres and packed sports venues have not returned. But despite this, COVID is far from being as widespread and as deadly as it was at the turn of the year. Indeed, new numbers out from the Office of National Statistics show there are now 10 times the number of people dying from flu or pneumonia than those losing their life from coronavirus. In the week ending June the 11th, there were just 84 cases of COVID being recorded on death certificates in England and Wales. By contrast, there were 1,163 deaths involving flu or pneumonia. COVID now accounts for just 0.8% of all deaths. Dr. Bob Gill, a GP based in Welling, South East London, has warned that because of the lockdown restrictions, there is the potential for a worse flu pandemic this year.
Because of the lockdowns, because of the lack of social contact, the natural passage of flu through the community hasn't occurred. So potentially there hasn't been that build-up of immunity within the population. So that does make the potential spread of a flu virus more serious.
Now, the mood music in Westminster is the government intends to press ahead with lifting all restrictions on July the 19th, having delayed full reopening, of course, which had been due to happen 2 days ago. Nevertheless, even by our current trajectory, there will be 30,000 new infections a day by that point. And as Boris Johnson suggested earlier in the week, this winter could be tough, in large part because of a flu pandemic.
I think what the scientists are saying is that, things like flu will come back this winter. We may have a rough winter for all sorts of reasons. And obviously there are big pressures on the NHS. All the more reason to reduce the number of COVID cases now, give the NHS the breathing space it needs to get on with dealing with all those other pressures. And we're certainly going to be putting in the investment to make sure that they can.
Prime Minister Boris Johnson concluding Theo Usher's report. Let's bring to the conversation Dr. Simon Clarke, who's Associate Professor in Cellular Biology at the University of Reading. We've always been told we'll be driven by the data. Clearly now, Professor, this data means we can move to unlock. Good morning.
Good morning, Nick. I think that the government's response to that would be that keeping things locked down, keeping restrictions imposed, is meant to keep the numbers of infections down. But, of course, they are still going up.
They are still going up, but you'll probably be aware nearly 9 in 10 adults have antibodies for COVID-19 across Britain. 1 in 125 deaths is linked to coronavirus. 10 times the number of deaths from flu and pneumonia, and some hospitals have seen no COVID patients for 3 months. How much longer do you think the restrictions should be in place?
I would have liked to see them lifted this week, but they're not being. And
do you support that?
It's a difficult one.
It's a yes or no. I'll tell you that I don't. I'm far more informed by what you say because you're an expert in the field and I'm not. Where are you, Professor?
Well, I'm going to have to go with yes in that case.
Why.
Unfortunately, because the numbers are going up. The fact that there are not infections in some hospitals, they've got no cases. We were in that situation last summer, and I don't think that that's a good enough metric.
Professor, you're an incredibly wise bloke. You don't beat a virus with a lockdown, do you?
No, you don't.
Right.
But you stop it from getting out of hand.
Why? It's not out of hand. It was out of hand. It's not out of hand now compared with people who are contracting other and indeed dying from other causes, surely.
It's not out of hand. No, you're quite right. But they don't want it to get out of hand. You've got to remember, the government don't actually tell us what the metrics they use to decide whether they're going to impose a lockdown or not are. So it's almost impossible to say what they're going to do.
Come on, Simon. July the 19th, July the 5th. Where would you place the date, lastly?
My guess is July the 19th.
Oh, my God. And that is face masks gone, social distancing gone, the world returns to whatever the normal world will be, would you say?
I certainly hope so.
You and me both. Thanks as ever for your time. Always enjoy speaking with you. Simon Clarke is Doctor and Associate Professor in Cellular Biology at the University of Reading. Important, though, of course, to put the economic case, which is, I know, and it's absolutely fine, you all revel in pouring a bucket of over my head every morning when I urge the country. Honestly, in the unlikely event that I'm still alive in 12 months' time, we will be hearing about the most horrific instances, businesses collapsing, emotional health, and, just today, eating disorders have surged by more than a fifth in 11 months. Well, what's been going on over the last 11 months? We need to get some normality back. But I'm no economist. Andrew Lillico is. He's also a columnist for The Telegraph. Where are you now? Is it, I would argue, the data moves really to unlock. Good morning.
Yes, indeed. Well, it seems to me that the data, actually, it's fairly clear now that we could have unlocked this week. The data has proved to be quite a lot better than was expected at the time that the unlocking decision was taken. So you'll recall that when he made the decision, Boris Johnson was emphasising that cases were rising, he said, at 64% per week on the metrics that he was using. But within 3 or 4 days of that, he was announcing that, they were down to about 32%. They'd halved, and now down about just over 30% per week. So, and that hadn't been expected. Let's emphasise that is something for. So, for example, in the Warwick model, which was one of the models that the SAGE group used to develop to help them think about the question of whether it was safe to unlock, they were expecting that by last Monday we would have about 100,000 new cases per day. We actually have something like 25,000 new cases per day by that date. So less than a quarter of what it was that they had thought. So that's based on, you have your measured cases, 10,000 or so. Maybe we're not getting all of the measured cases. We're capturing all the infections in the measured cases because some people get through without getting tested. It's probably 2.5 times that. So we're way below the things which the models were forecasting in early June. And that's because it turned out that things weren't nearly as bad with this Indian variant as people had expected. So it seems to me that it's pretty clear already we had much better hospitalization efficacy of the vaccines than they had expected. The spread rate is much slower than they expected, and they'd planned against it. They were nervous about a kind of worst case scenario, which some of the data suggested might be possible. Just at the moment that they were making a decision, within days it's become clear that that wasn't so. I think they should be safe to open on July the 5th.
Andrew, this is an almost unquantifiable question, but I need to ask it. Can you give a sense of the damage the economy has sustained?
Oh, well, yes. So, there's various ways to think about this. I mean, a lot of people talk about the loss to GDP. You've got, your 10% contraction in GDP and then growing again rapidly. But I think a more interesting way of thinking about that question is to think about the welfare loss to society. So I ask people the question, well, suppose that you had been able to live a year in the past instead of March 2020 through to now, the past 15 months or so. Would you have preferred to have lived March 2020 to now, or to have lived, say, 2000 to 2001, or 1989 to 1990, or 1979 to 1980, or 1969 to 1970?
Got it.
I would say, I find that most people think that they would have preferred probably to have lived, they're pretty confident they would have preferred to have lived from 1989 to 1990, so over that year, and things probably change around 1979, 1980, they become less sure. Okay. That indicates that the loss of welfare, of our enjoyment of society in that year, equates to something roughly equivalent to 60% of GDP in that year. So
I will leave it there. Andrew, thank you. Andrew Lillicoe, economist and Telegraph columnist. There we are, I've got it. Here's a question for you. Can I take you back to May the 2nd? Do you remember that trial up in Liverpool, a big top to a festival headlined by the Blossoms? I've got all their early work. Do you remember that? And do you remember 5,000 people packed in on May the 2nd? So now the data is in. 5,000 people, no distancing, no social masks, total strangers standing next to each other, dancing, doing what people do at festivals. How many COVID infections as a result of those 5,000 people? 12, 120, or 1,200? 12, 120, or 1,200, the number of infections. That, plus a horrific court case after the news.
It left owners traumatised and police stumped. The trial of the alleged Brighton cat killer continues. I'm LBC's Lauren Roberts with the latest.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
7:21. Charlie, you'll be the first caller on that. I asked you remember the test event up in Liverpool in the big top, 5,000 fans gathering. This was on May the 2nd, so the relevant time lapse has taken place for a festival headlined by Blossoms band. Who would call them the Blossoms? How ridiculous. Blossoms band. And I asked you, was it 120 or 12 or 1,200, 1,200? There were 12 cases of COVID. Unfortunately, everybody is fine. 12 with 5,000 people packed together as you are at festivals. I wonder why the government haven't put those figures out yet. Oh, I'll let you decide. Front pages of the newspapers. There's a sort of joyous tone among some of them. Blueprint for holiday liftoff. Ministers poised to end amber list curbs for fully jabbed from July 19 as the Mail. The travel industry, by the way, big day of demonstration, and we're looking at that in more detail later in the show. The Eye, a similar theme, vaccine boost for Britain as jabs take lead over Delta, and a similar theme for the Times, face masks and distance rules set to go on July the 19th. Front page of the Metro, 60,000 people coming home. Wembley Stadium will host 60,000 fans for the climax of Euro 2020. We did look at this, of course, yesterday. I doubt that they're all in the same social bubble. This is two England players are still effectively benched. I understand they might be available for the game next Tuesday against whichever opposition England progresses to. But obviously they can't train. But the Scottish team were able to play, and we're bringing 2,000 strangers in for all the major games each game, and then 60,000 in total. I mean, these rules do seem strange. There's football on the front page of the Sun. Easy, queasy, as in easy. The Sun says that was Raheem Sterling. I didn't say that it was particularly easy. But anyway, queasy in that we go forward. England go forward to play, well, it looks like France, Portugal, or yes, you guessed it, Germany in another European, or even Euro World Cup knockout game. The Daily Mirror also has the holiday hope. Daily Test holds hope. Front page of the Daily Telegraph, exclusive interview with Michael Gove, in which he suggests there's no Scottish referendum before the next election. That's likely to get people excited, of course, north of the border. Talking about great days of votes. The Daily Express reflects on it 5 years since the Brexit vote, and Boris Johnson saying Brexit is unlocking our true potential. Many of you might think differently. And this interesting story in the Financial Times, more than 5 million people have become millionaires during the pandemic. Sadly, the report says that if you went into the pandemic in not great financial straits, you've come out it worse. If you went in on your way to making a few quid, you've come out even better. I wonder if that reflects your story. And lastly, a story we're looking at in more detail later in the show. Ministers push to sell Channel 4 in TV shake-up, and you have various people bleating and moaning, say it will be the end of British broadcasting as we know it. I would have sort of give it to the market if I were you. If somebody buys it and they make a go of it, they'll do well. If they don't, they'll lose their shirt, won't they? We'll look at that a little bit later. Right, let's talk about this lockdown. All the numbers, I would suggest, coming our way, driven by data, but still, it would appear, no easing off. Charlie in Gillingham, in Kent, do you think we could have actually relaxed on Monday, as was initially promised? Good morning.
Definitely. I think we're far overreacting, and it's just taking it to the far extreme, and I think they're going to come out smelling of roses on July 19th and say how well we've really done.
Why are they doing this, do you suppose? God only knows. Honestly, my concern is, my view is they're concerned about the inquiry that will take place. They need to do everything they can to cover their respective backsides, which is why, having gone in so slow, they're coming out so slow as well.
Yeah, I think so, and I think that, that's going to be a massive positive for them for that inquiry. And we've extended the lockdown, and I think they're going to say this was the right thing to do, and we've done the right course of action. When in fact they all know they could have released it a lot earlier.
I think a lot of people would agree with that. Charlie, thank you for that. You have yourself a good day. Let's pick up on other stories. A horrific case that's come before the courts. A court was told of an alleged cat killer who struck many times. LBC's Lauren Roberts is at the trial at Chichester Crown Court. Lauren.
For months, owners were left traumatised and police left stumped as more than a dozen cats were injured. Investigations began in October 2018, with a breakthrough coming 8 months later. During that time, 9 cats were killed and a further 7 injured. The court heard in May 2019 Stuart Montgomery and his partner at home when their kitten came in bleeding after sustaining a fatal knife wound. After returning from the vet, Mr. Montgomery is said to have then noticed a trail of blood and spotted a CCTV camera nearby. The camera had in fact been set up by a neighbour whose cat had been stabbed and killed the year before, the court heard. According to prosecutors, footage obtained appears to show security guard Steve Bouquet stroking a cat, taking something from his rucksack before making a sudden jerk with his arm. 54-year-old Bouquet from Brighton previously pleaded not guilty to 16 counts of criminal damage in relation to cats and 1 count of possession of a knife. The court heard DNA belonging to both Bouquet and a domestic cat were found on a blade recovered from his home after he was arrested in June 2019. The trial is continuing.
Lauren, thank you. 7:27. Some emails, texts and tweets coming to you, Ian, in a moment. Jason says, will someone please at LBC pull the choke chain on Nick and stop still calling it Freedom Day? We're not being oppressed. It's wrong to begin with this. It's echoing tabloids. Jason, I wonder if you work in the travel industry or the events industry or the wedding industry, or you have a son or a daughter or grandchildren who are trying to plan their wedding. Tell them there are no restrictions, not least as they see, 20,000 people dancing around Wembley last night, but they can't have a dance at their own son's or daughter's or their own wedding. So you can dance, or indeed in Scotland, in these fan zones, you can dance and hug total strangers, cover each other with beer, but you can't dance at your daughter's wedding. You don't see that as some kind of restrictions or lack of freedom, Jason? I know I do. J. Abdul, are you going to have some balance on your programme, or are you just going to listen to people saying lockdowns haven't worked? Mr. Abdul, give me a call. The number is, 0 it starts with, obviously, and then I'm going to say a 5, but it might be an 8, but I don't know. But anyway, it's on the website. They'll give you the number. Otherwise, just keep sending emails. Ian's in Regent's Park. He found the number. Ian, what are you going to tell me? Good morning.
Hello, hi Nick, I'm going to give Abdul a bit of balance that he wanted.
OK, good on you. J. Abdul, yes, go ahead, sir.
I think that there's the start of the third wave, and that's why they haven't opened up. Now, hopefully, this wave, surely this wave won't be as bad as the previous ones. But it was 11,000. It was 11,000 cases, new cases yesterday, and 27 new deaths. Now that's going to creep up a little bit, so we've got to be prepared for that. And like you say, this inquiry's coming along, and they've got to cover their backsides.
But won't the vaccinations check it this time, Ian?
Yes, but the people are still getting affected and people are still going into hospital, and unfortunately people are still dying, but not in such great numbers. And I know you've got facts on flu and pneumonia, etc. But you're absolutely right, Nick, about these rules. 20,000 people, 60,000 people for the semi-final and the final. These delegates coming over, although they're maybe in bubbles, I think that's a cop-out. They should have just told them to do one.
Absolutely.
Take it to Hungary, take it to Rome, do what you want with it. But there are certain things. There are anomalies. I've got a friend of mine who's going to his uncle's funeral, and they are still having to pick who's going and who's not going.
But you've got 60,000 people dancing around Wembley. This
exactly.
Is absurd.
So you're absolutely right with that. The rules are all over the place. Why was Mason Mount and the other fella...
Ben Chilwell, Mason Mount.
Ben Chilwell, when when Scotland played last night, are you telling me that the fella Gilmore didn't associate and come close with his teammates? It's ridiculous. It's all a mishmash. You had Kwasi Kwarteng talking about him going over to the Gulf and didn't have any restrictions. It seems like it's one rule for one rule for another, and it's just made up as it's going along. But
brilliant call, Ian. We're going to look at that in more detail. The insanity that 2 English lads still can't train with the team. I think they could be picked. But the Scotland team, bad luck to them, but who've been sharing coaches and hotels and whatever else, training pitches, all were able to be picked. Ian, thank you. I have to get a move on. Thoroughly, and I like both the fact that you challenged me and you agreed with me. It's probably what a conversation should be all about. Have a good one, Ian. We'll continue this. Also, coming up after the news, 5 years ago to the day, Britain went to the polls to vote on...
Brexit means Brexit, and we're going to make a success of it. There will be no attempts to remain inside the EU.
Well, you didn't, did you? You just ran through a field of wheat instead, I think. Oh, and remember this bet?
Hi, Nick. It's Michael Gove here. When I appeared on your show last Tuesday, we had a bet. I said Scotland would beat England 3-0.
And what's in the aftermath? Michael pays up, and you'll find out where the money goes after this. 7:31.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
7:35 is the time. Nikki, I'm going to talk to you. I think you are equally angry that thousands of people are dancing around football stadiums. But I think your daughter can't have a school party, so I'll come to that in a moment. Shall we talk Money and Finance. David Buick joins me from Aquis Exchange. We won't replay the bets. Well done, David. You didn't maybe get the scores right, but you got the general thrust of the games right with England and Scotland. And just a word, Scotland put up a plucky fight, didn't they? It was sad to see them go.
Yeah, very sad.
Yeah.
I mean, they really gave it the best. When you consider their resources against a country like England, their performance is brilliant.
They should have won on last Friday anyway. They were far the better
side. Yeah.
Anyway, on England Go, we'll probably talk about that, and I'll get you a prediction from you on Tuesday. I bet you it's going to be Germany, by the way.
I bet you it is, so do I, yeah.
There's a new and I know your wallet will be full of these soon, a new £50 note coming. Give us the background, and also for my listeners who've perhaps got a couple of the old ones, how long have they got to spend them? David?
Well, the old one, £50 notes, had James Watt of the railway engine situation, and that is going to go, Nick, on the 30th of September 2022.
Oh, right,
But today, the 23rd of June, which is the birthday of Alan Turing, who made the incredible contribution to the situation at Bletchley Park.
Yes.
And people will remember that wonderful film, The Imitation Game, with Benedict Cumberbatch.
Well, I don't think we'd have won the war without him, in all honesty.
No, we wouldn't. No. And that was very well portrayed. If anybody's not seen the film, they should do so. Anyway, this £50 note will be introduced by Andrew Bailey, who yesterday said that Turing's was a remarkable life and contribution to our society was huge. He sort of said he was also gay and was sort of treated appallingly as a result, and we know that. Anyway, this comes on parade today. It's plastic rather than the normal one in the past, and that's why we're changing them all on the 30th of September.
Indeed, if you leave them in the washing machine, they will survive. OK, talking about people with £50 notes, if you went into it with a lot of money, you've come out with more. If you went in with it with not a lot, sadly, you've fared rather badly. I speak of the pandemic and cash. Give us the details. FT Splash this one.
Yes, it was a very good article, this, by Alistair Gray in the FT today. The coronavirus pandemic was, as you put it, has wreaked misery and economic damage around the world. But it's been a boon for the rich, and an estimated 5.2 million people have become dollar millionaires. And also, by those worth more than 50 million by another 25%. It's quite extraordinary. This is data put together by Credit Suisse, who said that accumulated wealth rose by $28.7 trillion to around the world. These include assets like, of course, obviously equities that boomed, particularly in the United States, things like paintings, including property, and minus debts, to about 418 trillion. But as pointed out, in this period, the rich got richer, and sadly, those that don't have got even less.
Indeed. Talking the early hours tomorrow morning. David Buick, thank you.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Call 0345 6060973.
Just a little more detail. Of course, James Watt was the Scottish mechanical engineer who worked on Thomas Newcomen's steam engine with his own steam engine, which effectively fueled the Industrial Revolution. That was the face, and still is for another year or so, I think, of the £50 note, yielding to Alan Turing, and probably quite right too. Nikki, just before I come on to you and your story about, I think it's your daughter, her party, as we're talking cash, you may recall last week I had a bet with none other than Michael Gove. He's paid up.
Hi, Nick. It's Michael Gove here. When I appeared on your show last Tuesday, we had a bet. I said Scotland would beat England 3-0, and then hours later, when you'd stopped laughing, you said, OK, 3-1. If indeed Scotland win by 3 goals, I'll give you £300 to a charity of your choice. If, however, Scotland fail, then I, Michael Gove, will give £100 to a charity of your choice. Well, as we all know, while Scotland, of course, completely outclassed England, they didn't actually win by 3-0, so I've got to honour that bet. So I've given £100 to the Karen Keating Foundation at your request. Brilliant charity, and I hope that my small donation goes some way to their fantastic work. And, of course, I'm recording this, Nick, before tonight's clash between Scotland and Croatia. I'm not going to make any predictions, but what I will say is I look forward to appearing on your show again soon, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to donate to this outstandingly good charity.
Michael Gove, thanks for paying up. Good sport. I look forward to our next bet. Nikki in Hillingdon. OK, let's get to the detail. There was a party coming your daughter's way. Is that correct? Good morning.
So, it's the girls' high school in Hillingdon that they are having their end-of-year prom.
Oh, right.
And
American.
so obviously all the parents have been preparing for this now for the last month because we wasn't sure whether it was going to go ahead. And then got a text message yesterday saying that they have the the venue that's going to be holding the event
party,
has cancelled. Yeah, has cancelled.
When was it? When was the prom booked for?
9th of July.
Oh, right, okay. And how many... Sorry, is it an all-girls school? How many children...
It's an all-girls school, yeah, so I'm not quite sure of the numbers of children, but these sixth formers have all been, or year 11s, have all been together throughout this whole pandemic. You know, when we didn't want our children to go to school and we were made to make them go, they've all been together this whole time. They go to assemblies, they sit in assemblies together, but yet they're not allowed to go and have an end-of-year prom before they all disappear to their colleges and whatnot.
Can't they do the party in the hall? In a school hall? I know it's not the same. I know it's not...
Yeah, but why can't they? Or on the
no, but that's why I'm asking... Well, so it's the venue that's pulled, right? Not the school?
Yeah, no, apparently it's the venue. I don't know if I'm allowed to name the venue.
I best say if you wouldn't, but why couldn't the school now turn the gym into almost like those movies?
This is it, isn't it? They've said that they're going to reevaluate and see what happens. But
how long has your daughter been planning for her prom? They didn't exist when I was a child.
They know for the whole year. Normally, because it's a girls' school, there's a boys' school next door, and the two schools would merge together. They decided that it wouldn't merge this year, which is unfortunate, but it is what it is. At least the prom is still going ahead. I've just spent £400 on a dress, along with a lot of other parents I know has done the same thing. That's not including, shoes and bags.
And presumably a nice car. Often they get limos to and from.
Yeah. Thankfully, I haven't booked one of them yet because I haven't.
Well, maybe let us know if the school... I would hope that the school... And I know it will be like something... Is it the film Grease where they have the prom? I'm pretty it is in the gym. I know it's not what the girls wanted, and of course they want to go to a hotel or a country club or whatever they're going to. I doubt a village hall. But do let me know what happens. Nikki, thank you. I can hear the... Obviously, when your kids don't get what they want, it's a heartbreaker. More on this in a moment. 7:42. Now, we've talked about these strange rules, haven't we? 2 England lads can't train today. Well, they can train on their own, I suppose. Ben Chilwell and Mason Mount. They might be able to play. Meanwhile, the whole Scotland team, sadly, until they went out, were able to be picked. These strange rules. And now, of course, to our others. VIPs for the final matches of Euro 2020 will agree not to leave football bubbles under government plans. Under these proposals, around 2,500 VIPs per match would be allowed into the country, but under a strict agreement only to attend the football. This would, the government says, put them in a bubble. What utter footballs. Total footballs. It's not going to work, is it? Rob Harris is global sports correspondent with the Associated Press, regularly helps us with sporting matters, joins me now. Am I being too cynical, Rob? Do you think this has merit? Good morning.
Good morning, and it's the government's move to try to keep this European Championship final in London. There had been the public threat that from UEFA, they talked about an alternative plan potentially to take the final out of London. Budapest was there as an option. They've been having full stadiums during this Euros by fans showing immunity cards, and we've already seen London lose the Champions League final. Of course, it was due to be the backup option.
Istanbul, didn't it?
Well, it was due to be in Istanbul.
Oh.
Then we were the backup, and then it went to Porto in the end.
Oh, did it? I'm so sorry. Right.
Yeah, and originally, the only way fans were due to go to Portugal for that from Chelsea and Manchester City was going within bubbles, 24-hour bubbles, staying in the country for a short period of time. But actually those rules were relaxed in the week of the final. Actually, fans were able to go out there. And, one of the issues we saw then was fans coming back from Portugal, some being caught up on planes in terms of people testing positive. And, of course, Michael Gove was one of those. But he didn't have to self-isolate because he took part in that daily testing instead.
I see. Did UEFA mean it when they said we'll go to Rome, we'll go to Budapest? Rob, did they mean it, or were they just baring their teeth?
Well, I think it was an attempt to try to cajole the government to get what they wanted, which is to particularly get not only the visiting VIPs and sponsors, but also to get some fans still potentially from those teams competing in the semi-finals and the final. I've not heard of an actual final agreement yet on that yet. There is a plan, but the thing is, there actually are some current quarantine exemptions in place for these Euros. Actually, media are able to fly into the UK to go to games here, as long as they only go from their hotels and to the stadium.
But we have to take it on trust, presumably, do we, Rob? We don't monitor them, we don't tag them, do we?
Well, exactly, that's not the case, not like as we're seeing potentially in Japan at the Olympics, where they are using some form of GPS tracking.
Oh, really?
That's currently in the works there.
Okay. Are you going to the Olympics?
The plan currently, but things change very often.
Well, if you are, we'll definitely talk to you in Tokyo. Thank you for that. Always good speaking to you. Rob Harris, Global Sports Correspondent, writer of Associated Press. More of your views on these restrictions and the data, which I say is coming our way towards freedom. I know that annoys some of you. Darren, you'll be a caller on that. And 39 years ago, it was launched, but now it could be for sale.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be able to say to you, welcome to Channel 4.
God, how old am I? I covered that for The Sun. What was the first show they went into? Anybody? Their first show? It wasn't Naked Attraction. No, it wasn't Big Brother. It was Countdown.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC. Call 0345 6060973.
9 minutes before 8 is the time. We'll talk more about restrictions with Darren in a moment or two. But let's come to the conversation that we're going to have about Channel 4 and obviously take your calls on that as well. And I have to smile because having been in this business as long as I have, and indeed having been on The Sun, I think that I've written a few times there's a massive shake-up of the landscape of British television. We read again that and we've had quite a few shake-ups down the years, but this apparently is the latest. After 4 decades, Channel 4 as a public-owned broadcaster could be about to come to an end as it's put up for sale. But why? Why would they want to? Let's turn to Conservative MP and Minister of State for Media and Data, John Whittingdale, who joins me now. Morning, Minister. Why do you want to do this?
Good morning.
Morning.
Well, Channel 4 has been a great success. I mean, it was created to provide an alternative viewpoint, distinctive content, and it has succeeded in that. But as you've just said, the world is changing very fast. We've seen a dramatic increase in the number of providers of TV content with people like Amazon and Netflix and Sky and Apple and Disney all coming on. And that is going to put quite significant pressure on the model of Channel 4. At the moment, it's entirely dependent on advertising revenue. It gets no public money. And if its market share falls because of the competition, that model becomes increasingly hard to sustain. So we think it's the right time to consider whether there isn't a better model to make sure that Channel 4 continues to thrive into the future.
But isn't there also the argument, Mr. Whittingdale, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, and you've just lauded its success? There's no indication that it is going to dip, is there?
Well, I mean, I think that over the longer term, a lot of people think that it will be very difficult to sustain this model. There is no question that, the strength of competition, we've already seen, particularly younger people, turning away from traditional broadcasters and spending more and more time on the streaming services, and the amount of money that they are able to put into their content, the amount that Netflix spends or Amazon spends on TV content is far higher than the traditional broadcasters, and as a result they've been winning a lot of viewers with great programs. So in order to be able to continue to survive in that environment, we think that there may well be a case for allowing Channel 4 to have an alternative model which could give it access to the kind of investment needed in order to continue to compete.
Give me the names of some of those great programs you just referenced, Minister.
Well, I mean, if it, on Netflix.
No, Channel 4. What do you watch? What do you watch like on Channel 4, Mr. Whittingdale?
Well, I mean, to give you an example, I mean, which was an award winner, I did think It's a Sin was a great drama and actually was very much what Channel 4 is about. It's about alternative programming.
39 years of broadcasting and a 4-week serial, It's a Sin. That's the best we got, is it, Mr. Whittingdale?
No, it's not the best at all.
What else do we have, sir?
It's a more recent example. But, I mean, Channel 4 takes on now big programmes like It's a Quiet Bake Off, it does Gogglebox. Channel 4 News is certainly distinctive.
That's one word for it, Mr. Whittingdale.
To others.
Okay.
So it does have a special place, and we don't want to damage that. We want to sustain that.
John, if I may call you that.
Of course.
Well, that's very kind. Sir David Attenborough was once the most trusted man in Britain. He says of your plans, not your personal, your government's plans, they're short-sighted political and financial attacks. John Whittingdale.
Well, I'm a huge admirer of David Attenborough, but I don't agree with him on that. It's actually about trying to sustain Channel 4, not undermine it. And it is exactly because of the pressure that we think is going to be on Channel 4's finances. And indeed, across the board, we're trying to strengthen public service broadcasting. One of the other areas where we're considering change is to try and ensure that the BBC, Channel 4, ITV, Channel 5 still remain at the top of the guide. It's people can find them easily, and that's this issue of prominence, because there is a risk now that they'll get lost amongst all these other channels. So there are a variety of measures that we're going to be looking at to strengthen our public service broadcasting system.
Lastly on this, John, should you be nervous it might fall into the hands of an overseas company, Rupert Murdoch or the Discovery Channel?
Well, we will look at the alternatives. We'll be interested to hear from anybody who expresses interest. I would just point to Channel 5, which used to be under British ownership and frankly did struggle a bit. It was then acquired by Viacom, which is a US company, and since then they have put a lot of money in. They've made some great programs, and its market share has gone up. So I think overseas ownership in itself is not necessarily a bad thing. It could actually help, because it will open up access to the kind of investment. But there's a range of possibilities. This is a consultation, so we haven't reached any final decision yet.
OK. As if your department isn't busy enough, also football, I understand, will fall under your remit to a point. And these idea of bubbles, 2,500 VIPs per match as we move to the more exciting knockout stages coming into this country. How are you going to keep them all in a bubble?
Well, I should correct you. I'm not responsible for football, but nevertheless, you're absolutely right. I'm a DCMS minister.
The department you're in is, though, is it not?
Indeed. Yeah, absolutely right. And I was lucky enough to be at Wembley last night.
Then you can definitely cop a few questions on this, John. Right. These bloody bubbles are a load of footballs, aren't they? They're not going to work, Mr. Whittingdale.
Well, we are slowly moving to relax the restrictions. So last night, for instance, we allowed 20,000 people to attend at Wembley, subject to proof that they'd either have vaccinations or negative tests. We're going to expand that number for the semi-finals. It will go up to 60,000, still subject to those requirements of demonstration that people are not positively tested. And we are.
But how are you going to keep 2,500 VIPs from Hungary or from Italy in a bubble?
Well, if they come here, and we haven't reached any final decision about numbers, we are talking to UEFA about allowing VIPs or people associated with the teams to attend, but they won't just be allowed to sort of roam around Britain freely. They will be coming in to attend a match. They'll be having to stay in a designated place, go to the match, go home again. So, there will still be restrictions, but we are in the position where we are able to slowly relax. As I say, we're going to significantly increase, by 3 times the number of people able to attend those matches.
But you can dance around in Wembley with total strangers, but you can't dance at your daughter's wedding. Or indeed you still restrict the numbers at funerals. It's not joined-up thinking, is it, Mr. Whittingdale?
No, I completely understand people's frustration, and I want people to be able to dance around at weddings and go to the theatre as much as anybody else. But this is a careful programme. We've identified specific events where we've allowed people to attend in greater numbers in order to test that it is safe. That was what last night was about. It was what some of our earlier events, like the snooker finals, were about. And so far, the evidence is very encouraging, and that it is on that basis that we've been able to move to make further relaxation.
It is a heartbreaker for people with weddings planned. You do accept that?
Yeah.
That they look at the TV and they can't work it out.
We've made, some relaxations specifically for weddings, as you know, in June, and I very much hope that, come July the 19th, we'll be able to remove a lot of these restrictions and people will be able to go back to these things. But we have to move cautiously.
All right. And lastly, was there a real threat, or how real was the threat, that the UEFA could have moved the games to Rome or to Budapest, and that, I read, was the concern of the government? How real was that?
Well, we are not going to do anything to put public health at risk, but on the other hand, we completely understand, we want to host the semi-finals in this country and maybe have a final, and, very much hope that England will be playing in those matches, and people will be able to go and watch them do so. But, that is an ongoing discussion. We are very hopeful that we can hold these events at Wembley, but, as I say, we're not going to do anything that will put at risk the amazing progress that we've made over the last year.
And I know you want Wales to progress as well. I know you want to say that. Indeed.
Absolutely.
I want to make sure next time you cross the Severn Bridge or whatever it is, I want you to be absolutely welcomed with open arms. Lastly, 5 years ago today, you might recall, I'm sure you do, it was Brexit Day. How will you remember Brexit 5 years on? John Whittingdale.
I remember Brexit Day in that it was something I campaigned for, as you know, during the course of the referendum. So I was both delighted by the result and also, I have to say, amazed. I mean, I don't think anybody expected that there would be a vote to leave, but I thought it was the right decision to take. And I can say to you, Nick, 5 years later, I still believe it was the right decision to take.
Always good speaking with John. Thank you for your time. John Whittingdale, Minister of State for Media and Data.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Nick Ferrari at breakfast.
Morning, 4 minutes after 8 on Wednesday, June the 23rd. What's the truth behind the headlines for the travel industry? Blueprint for holiday liftoff is one. Vaccine boost for Britain. Jabs take lead over Delta is another. As a day of action is planned by the travel industry. You'll hear from one of the organisers, and then, of course, we'll take your views on that. As I just referenced in my conversation with John Whittingdale, 5 years ago it was this.
Today marks 5 years since our vote to leave the European Union. I'm LBC's Theo Usherwood with the backstory.
What about a week off for 700 staff? It's a date for one company.
What are you waiting for?
It's a match. It's a match.
Find me on Bumble.
Find me on Bumble.
Yeah, because the staff are so stressed, they're all getting a week off. That's the time to make them work harder. That's how you should be. Only kidding. And what of 1 in 10 children now absent from school as self-isolation is poised, it says, to wreak havoc with their education once more?
Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
Who would be in the travel industry? Your heart goes out to them, as it does the event industry, weddings and others, but the travel industry. But particularly because it's been such stop. Impossible to deduce what's going on. And with this traffic light system, which I think when inquiries actually rumble their way through, probably beginning sometime next year, possibly in the spring, I think along with the provision of PPE, along with the tardiness with which the UK government moved, I think the way they handle travel is going to come back to bite them in the rear end, and probably deservedly. Having said that, I mentioned those two headlines. Vaccine boost for Britain is one very positive one here. Blueprint for holiday liftoff. But understandably, the travel industry, the aviation industry, I think probably have now had enough, and they're planning a day of action. Tim Alderslade is Chief Executive of Airlines UK. That's a representative body for all UK registered airlines, and can give us more details. OK, Mr. Alderslade, what's planned today? Good morning.
Morning. Yeah, so it's the first time today that the whole of the travel and aviation sectors have come together to really just express their frustration, annoyance, outrage at the way in which the sector has been treated these past 15 months.
What makes you the angriest, Tim? What do you get most angry about?
I think it's a combination of lack of sexual support for the sector these past 15 months, and, as you referenced, the haphazard way that they've introduced the traffic light system. They announced a review which took several months of everyone's time, and then they haven't followed through with it. They didn't announce or launch the Green Watch List, which obviously saw Portugal yanked off the Green List with, days' notice, with people stranded overseas. And then right at the last minute, they announced that they were going to advise against travel to amber countries. Now, the whole point of the traffic light system was that it was risk-based, proportionate, and that you would have factors baked in to mitigate against the risk, for example, PCR tests and self-isolation. So to then advise people against travel to amber countries was really a kick in the stomach, because what we've now got is very few countries on the green list. Portugal was the major market.
Yes, that's gone.
Obviously was gone. And even just looking at the news and the speculation, we're not expecting many more countries to go on the green list until the domestic reopening takes place in the middle of July. So what I think we're really hoping for is some movement on double vaccinated passengers, looking at the just how effective the vaccines are against the variants, including Delta. Can we follow what is happening in Europe and allow people who have been double jabbed to come back into the UK without having to self-isolate? That would really start to open up the market.
When one of my colleagues phoned me yesterday with the research that's just been published regarding the busyness of airports in this country, I was absolutely shocked. I'll just tell my listeners what those figures are and then get a reaction from you. Heathrow has slipped from being in first or second position, depending on how you count them, to 17th, and Gatwick from 10th to 106th. How long can the airline industry sustain these sort of drops in business?
Well, we've taken on billions of pounds of debt over the last 15 months. We haven't had the grant support that other sectors like hospitality and the arts sector has had. We've only been able to access the furlough scheme and other cross-economy schemes. I think we're clear that it's now or never for the sector in terms of opening up this summer. We cannot sustain any more debt. And if the government cannot give us a meaningful summer, which is when airlines make their money, they lose money in the winter. They have to start to recoup some of this money that they've taken on. Their balance sheets are shot to pieces. If that is not possible because the risk appetite just isn't there from ministers, we're already into June. If we don't get good news this week when ministers meet, possibly tomorrow, then it's going to be another 4 weeks, and time is a ticking, and we just won't be able to bring in the revenue that we need to get onto a more sustainable footing. So then we're into conversations with the Treasury around, could they extend the furlough scheme?
Sector-specific, of course, has been suggested. Tim Alderslade, your Chief Executive of Airlines UK, thank you for that. 10 after 8. So that's the push from the travel industry, the airline industry, of course. Hundreds of thousands of jobs potentially in play. Let's turn to Professor Gurch Randhawa, who's Director of the Institute for Health and Research and Professor of Diversity and Public Health at the University of Bedfordshire. And I understand, Professor, you still express caution. Good morning.
I do. I mean, firstly, I want to say I express sympathies with my colleagues in the travel industry because I think they have been let down by government. But also I want us to remember that, our biggest sympathy should lie with the 150,000 odd deaths now we've experienced because of COVID and those families and loved ones. So my advice would be this, is the reason the travel industry are in this pickle is because the government are still taking a hotspot approach to suppressing the virus. So we know that it's possible to regain the travel sector. So if you look at countries like South Korea, Vietnam, China, they're up and running again. But they're up and running because they got their cases down. And as you said in the headlines, our cases perversely in the UK are going up. We're allowing cases and COVID to spread throughout secondary schools because the government, in their wisdom, have chosen since May the 17th to remove face masks, and therefore the virus is spreading. So I would urge the travel industry to say to government to use the next 3 weeks to reintroduce public health protection measures, so that's mask wearing in schools, ventilation in workplaces, especially in warehouses, frontline jobs, ventilation in schools, to bring cases down so that we can then consider
You want to take us
reopening.
backwards?
No, I'm trying to take us forward.
What has been the point of the
down.
vaccination programme?
Vaccination protects adults who are at risk, but if you want the number of cases to go down, you need to have public health measures.
You don't beat a virus with a lockdown, Professor, do you?
I've not used the word lockdown at all. I'm not suggesting lockdown at all. I want to avoid lockdown more than anybody
How
else.
are my listeners meant to reconcile what you're saying with watching 22,500 people dance around Wembley yesterday, most of whom don't know each other? And yet they can't hold weddings, full attendance weddings, and they have to restrict the numbers of mourners at a funeral.
I think it's very reasonable to ask for children to wear masks in secondary schools to bring the rates of cases down. As you said yourself in your headline, the number of kids now who are off home in social isolation, as you know, is going up. I think in your headline you said 1 in 10 children now are at home in self-isolation. They are in families and they're the ones who want to go on holiday. And we can only get them on holiday.
Nearly 9 in 10 adults have antibodies for COVID. 9 in 10 adults. You'll know better than I that fortunately children do not suffer in the same way as those who are older or have respiratory problems or whatever it might be. Why would you seek to put restrictions in even longer? The country's had enough.
I'm only asking for mask wearing. I'm not asking for lockdowns. I think we need to be really careful with the language we use. I'm completely against lockdowns as long as we can keep the cases and hospitalisations down. And the only way we can do that...
You've got some hospitals that haven't had a patient for 3 months, Professor. 3 months.
I'm afraid you'll find that A&Es are at the moment, and this is June, you'll find that a lot of A&Es are currently overrun.
Point me to one. Point me to one with COVID.
Barnsley Hospital.
Which one?
Yesterday, Barnsley.
Barnsley, sorry. Barnsley with COVID. Overrun with COVID.
No, these were overrun with patients. I'm not. So COVID numbers have gone up on a daily basis.
A&Es are always overrun. I don't know if and I hope you've never had to, but if ever you've had to attend an A&E for yourself or with a child, you'll know they're always busy. They're never sitting there waiting, reading the paper.
I think you'll find that daily COVID cases have gone up steadily in the last 2 weeks. There's a 31% lift today. There was a 30% yesterday. Last week there was a 64% lift on one day and a 66% lift on another day. Those are the figures we're talking about. So yes, they are increasing. The cases are all going up, and the sad truth is with COVID, because of its higher rate of
it'll
fatality...
always be here. It'll be back in the autumn. Are you going to have children wear masks for the rest of their school lives?
I think it's a reasonable ask to mitigate COVID by introducing mask wearing.
OK. Well, I'm grateful for your time. Thank you for all your expert research and background and detail. Gurch Randhawa, Director of the Institute for Health Research and Professor of Diversity and Public Health at the University of Bedfordshire, suggesting we wear masks probably until graduation day, I would have thought. We'll see what you make of that. Plus, 5 years ago today led to the morning after the night before.
The British people have made a very clear decision to take a different path, and as such, I think the country requires fresh leadership to take it in this direction.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC. Call 0345 6060973.
All right, let's just take some of the text, tweets and emails, and I'll come to you. Fiona, you'll be the first caller on this. This comes in from Trevor. It appears to me that we are having people who just want to be control freaks. Where will this end? Patrick Cryan says there seems to be an epidemic of professors who want to lock us down at the moment. Well, certainly to wear masks. And on the subject of the football, which we will return to, it does seem strange, doesn't it? 22,500 fans at Wembley last night, 60,000 when we progressed to the when the Euros progressed to the final, with or without England and Wales. Graham in Bush is a clever one. So the Scottish footballer Billy Gibson didn't mix with his teammates or the team officials, but only with 2 England players? Is he then Billy No Mates? That's very clever. He's funny, Gray. He should be a cartoonist. Well, he probably makes far more money than being a cartoonist. Mark in Zambia. Wow. I'm spitting with anger over the Euro 2020s. How can they let these officials and politicians into the country without quarantining? My wife has just spent 11 days in a quarantine hotel/prison at a cost of £1,750, which is incredulous, says Mark, as she has had COVID and had the vaccinations. We'll do more on the football later in the show. Let's talk to Fiona in Bromley. Fiona, you need to travel. Good morning.
Yes, good morning. I've been trying to get to my son, who lives in Ibiza, for 2 years now.
Oh, my gosh.
And
what happened in June 2019 that you couldn't go?
I broke my back.
Oh, God. I'm so sorry. That's horrific. Oh, dear, you're laughing about it.
It's just idiotic. But anyway, the problem is that he needs to come and get me now, because I'm getting much better, but I'm too frail to travel there. So the plan was to come and pick me up.
So he flies into London, comes down to Bromley, picks you up, takes you back to the airport and flies you out to Ibiza. Is that broadly what we're saying?
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
That's not going to happen this side of September, I wouldn't think, is it? I don't
know. No. And also, he says that the island, I mean, they've been so strict on the island.
Yes.
And I think there's probably there's a tiny amount of people that live there, but they've been so strict. And he says that there were no cases of COVID on the island.
Right.
straight away. But as soon as they lifted up, when was it? I can't remember now.
I'm sorry, I don't know what you're saying.
In the summer,
Right.
it was lifted up.
Right.
And they left.
Let me ask you this, Fiona. You've got obviously you've not been well, and I'm sorry to hear that. And you're desperate to put your arms around your son and have time. When you have people say, "Look, we just need to lock this down a little bit further, another 4 weeks. We're talking about a virus. Cases are soaring." How do you react?
I think what's the saying? The horse is bolted, and then
Right.
look, after
Yes.
the horse is bolted.
Closing the stable door after the horse is bolted. Yeah.
And I think that the government have been absolutely useless.
I think many people would agree with you. Fiona, I do hope the restrictions lift and you can see your son and get well soon. Thank you. Trevor in Poole. Trevor, what do you want to tell me? Good morning. Hello, sir.
Good morning.
Morning, sir.
I think people have to remember that it's not just the government that's stopping us from going abroad on holidays. A lot of the EU countries are blocking us from going to their countries, and I think this is politically motivated rather than COVID motivated.
Which countries can't you get into?
Well, you can't go to some places like Spain, France.
You can go to France. You have to quarantine upon your return.
Yeah.
So, you can go anywhere. Should you so desire, you can go to India or Brazil, but you have to respect the quarantine restrictions upon your return, of course.
Yes.
Yeah.
But there are also restrictions that are being
There are.
government.
But do you hold with where we find ourselves now, or do you think there should be greater relaxation?
I think there should be some relaxation if you've had your vaccines.
Okay. In time for this summer?
Yes.
Yeah, I think many people would agree. Trevor, thank you. Patrick in Derby. What do you say, Patrick? Good morning.
Good morning. So I wanted to make a comment on the professor who you were interviewing a few moments ago,
right?
Who was arguing for further restrictions based on the fact that case numbers are rising.
Right.
And when the government started its vaccination program, it could have chosen to minimise cases by starting to vaccinate the people who interact most in society. Instead, it started interacting the most vulnerable, meaning it chose a minimised deaths strategy over a minimised cases strategy.
Yeah, I got you.
So when I hear a man of learning using the wrong metric to measure the success of the vaccination program, it's very frustrating. Really, we should be looking at the number of deaths and whether or not they're rising. And at the moment, they're not at the rate that the cases are. So arguing further restrictions based on the wrong metric, to me, doesn't make any sense.
Well, he's not here, obviously, to defend himself. What he would say, though, is that, and this is true, more school children are now having to self-isolate as a result. So that is, to use your word, that is surely a metric that has to be considered.
Yes. However, the metric of whether or not the vaccines are doing their job shouldn't be measured on whether or not school children are coming down with COVID or having to self-isolate because they haven't been vaccinated. So they shouldn't be used to measure that success. And it's the vaccines that are driving our strategy of getting towards something resembling normal.
I wonder when we'll get there. Patrick, thanks for your input. Good points you make about the metrics. A couple of emails then coming to you, Andrew. Caroline in Northampton. This is now a nonsense. We should have totally unlocked this week. I think we might end up with freedom on 19th of July, but this isn't something we should be grateful for. The freedoms were taken from us without our consent. My worry is the legislation that was passed. I think it will be kept active so any government can bring in face masks and distancing at any time a virus gets, quotes, out of control. Dawn in Bexley, following our conversation... Oh, yes, I do remember speaking. I'm still angry these rules being thrown around. My daughter's wedding has been cancelled, yet football teams are allowed to play, knowing a teammate has COVID. It's so wrong. Everyone who was invited to our wedding has been vaccinated. We're even prepared to take COVID tests. Andrew in Broadstairs. Andrew, your reaction to this, and do you want to travel again?
Good morning, Nick. Thank you for having me on the show. The reason for my call is even sort of 6 minutes after hearing that professor, I presume professor loosely based that term, but that this guy has bored my blood. I'm literally exasperated with this type of guy being given air, being given media, being given exposure.
Well, he's trying to stop the spread among children, just to justify what the professor says.
I appreciate that, and of which, that's a good point, Nick, and there is not a single proves or suggests. It's just our preconception that children spread disease, and therefore we presume that children spread the COVID virus. There are people that would fuel that idea. I mean, my son worked his socks off to get to a grammar school.
Yep.
He does very well. He's a very clever lad, and he's forced and has been forced, you know, when they finally reopened, to wear masks the entire time. They still do today. He will wear his mask through the corridors in lesson. They are a barrier to prevent learning. They prevent the teacher communicating correctly. His school will take this type of guy's opinion, and they'll just apply that to drum up overreactive rules, and it's at the cost of the children's education. I'm absolutely sick of it. My blood is boiling over it. I closed for 2 weeks.
How old is your boy? How old is your boy?
My boy is 12. He's coming on for 12 now.
What does he say about it to you?
He hates it. Hates every single day. Every single day of wearing that mask at school. So he feels uncomfortable, face rashes, all the usual stuff. Can't understand. And what 12-year-olds do you know that will put their hand up and say, "I'm sorry, sir, I didn't hear that for the third time in a row." You know, they miss so much of their education based on the fact that they cannot understand, they cannot communicate correctly. And it's not just hallways, it's in class the entire time we're trying to talk to a teacher. It's just in the way. And again, I feel very frustrated because I am in manufacturing. I closed for 2 weeks. I feel I've funded through people that want to sit back on furlough, take the money and just play the game and say, well, not sure it's safe, don't really want to go out there, not yet. You know, just take the money, sit back, do nothing, do the garden. That's what it's going to do.
Good luck to your boy. You must be so proud of him getting into that grammar. I hope, my goodness me, the restrictions end. I say this so many times and the impact on different people, but that poor lad not enjoying us or having worked so damn hard to get into it, it's very frustrating. We'll come back to this conversation. Need to get to news in a moment or two. Also, coming up after the news, fancy a week off for 700 staff.
What are you waiting for?
It's a match. It's a match.
Find me on Bumble.
Find me on Bumble.
To soothe what's called their, quotes, collective burnout, all 700 staff at the company, which while headquartered in Austin, Texas, has offices around the world, including London, are going to get a week off. Paid, obviously. Could your business sustain that? And would you want it?
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC. Call 0345 6060973.
Have you used Bumble? I've just been being informed. Apparently the USP for Bumble is that boy meets girl. I don't know whether girls can meet girls and boys can meet boys, but anyway, the person with whom I was speaking, it's a boy meet girl situation, but it only proceeds if the girl then offers the invite. I've never used any of these. I would have done. I have absolutely no problem whatsoever. I'm just of an age where you probably did it all the wrong way in that you chose your life partner after a few drinks. That makes sense, doesn't it? Oh, you look absolutely beautiful. Let's marry. No, you wouldn't want to do it when you're stone cold sober in front of a computer, would you? With absolute clarity of thought. You want to do it when you're half full of Pinot Grigio and you've decided you've met the most attractive woman in your life, in the world. Anyway, let's come back to Bumble. Silicon Valley companies brought free snacks, ping pong and pods to the workplace. Now, Bumble has given the entire workforce a date. Do you see what the Times has done there? To soothe their collective burnout, they'll get a week off. 700 staff at the company. Headquartered in Austin, Texas, offices around the world, including London, have been told to switch off at the same time and enjoy a fully offline paid holiday. Bumble has had a surge in users during the pandemic, 100 million in February. But you can't meet up, can you, during the pandemic? I suppose you can now, but at the height of it, if you were to follow the rules, hello, I'm a very old man looking for love, right? And a woman comes back, all your luck. I can't then take her out for a glass of... Well, I don't know. The app's put women in charge of initiating contact. Oh, I see. That's a far better way of putting it than I did. It made its top market debut this year. Whitney Wolfe Hurd is the founder. She's the youngest woman to take a company public at age 31. She rang the NASDAQ bell with her 18-month-old son on her hip. She's the world's youngest female self-made billionaire. Well, credit to her. That's fantastic. But here we go. Hurd gave all 700 of us a paid week off, having correctly intuited our as in intuition. I didn't know you could break it down into a bit. Our collective burnout. In the US especially, where vacation days are notoriously scarce, it feels like a big deal. Do you know, when you start... Well, when I used to work there 100 years ago, when you start in America, you get 2 weeks holiday. That's all you get, plus public holidays, but you start with 2 weeks. Here, don't you get 6 weeks when you walk through the door, and then another week every time you do 6 months? So by the time you've done 10 years, you're basically coming from work about, 2 Thursdays, and that's it. Quite ridiculous. I do it the other way. You start taking holiday off people. OK, enough from me. Siobhan Murray is an author, psychotherapist, or this could be trouble for me, and a burnout strategist. Holy moly, for the love of all that's holy. What's a burnout strategist, Siobhan? Good morning.
Good morning, Nick. How are you?
Well, I think I'm OK, but I'm about to find out from you. I'm fine! And I've got a piece of paper from my psychiatrist to say so! I'm well! Sorry, go on.
Good to hear. So what I do is I specialise in burnout prevention primarily, rather than burnout recovery, because, pre-pandemic burnout was huge. I think what's happened over the last 18 months is what we've seen. People haven't had what I call runaway recovery.
Right. What's runaway recovery? Gosh, there's so much to discuss with you. What's runaway recovery?
Well, runaway recovery is what we all do. It's, we work really hard and we have these 2 weeks off and we plan our holiday and the excitement of going on holiday and we relax and it's great, and then we come back and we get back on the treadmill and we go, okay, let's plan our next holiday. We mightn't have to be able to afford to book it, but let's plan where we're going, what we're doing, even if it's next year.
Interesting.
We had that taken away from us. So, and we were all, primarily, most people were shoved back into their homes, whether they were working from their bedrooms or their kitchen tables, whether they kids, housemates, partners, elderly parents. We've had all of this. We've been like in these caves and we haven't had runaway recovery. So we were literally seeping burnout is the way I describe it. It's coming out from everybody, not just the caring professions.
Siobhan, how can only your loved ones or colleagues tell you're burning out, or can you sort of self-diagnose that you're burning out? And if you can, what should you look for?
Well, it's you might have sleep disturbance, that general, which we remember, a lot of the things I'm going to say, everyone can identify with and go, I have that. We're talking about periods of sort of 3 months and longer, where it's just, there's no respite from it. So we may be actually, a big one is a little bit more of dependency on alcohol, as a perceived distressor, because it's not, it affects your sleep, it then affects how you eat, irritability, just feeling completely disengaged from work and possibly your family. That feeling of being just, so what's the point? There's a lot of similarities to depression, but it's not depression. It is just, what I see as well is that there's the majority of people who suffer from burnout, regardless of industry, whether it's tech, whether it's somebody working in a supermarket, it's people who are high achievers, people who really push themselves to do their best.
I see. If you don't check burnout, where can it lead you? What is the ultimate fate?
I've had, over the last couple of years, I've had clients who've presented in A&E feeling that they're having a heart attack. Their vitals have been checked and they are absolutely fine, but their stress levels, because their bodies are not getting any respite from being in chronic stress. So that's why I really advocate for burnout prevention as opposed to burnout recovery.
And how do you facilitate burnout prevention?
So it's really, it's bizarre. I think as human beings, we love to overcomplicate. We think that things need to be really expensive or complicated. It's about bringing it right back to basics. I talk about 4 pillars, which is your sleep, nutrition, your exercise, and your clutter. And your exercise, Nick, is not about, oh God, I better start going out running 10K every day. It might be you just need a 20-minute walk. It might be turning the dial down, not turning the dial up.
And clutter, what do you mean by that, Siobhan?
So clutter is not just the clutter that we have all around us, the obvious clutter, but it's the clutter that it can be toxic relationships, it can be the way we talk about ourselves in our heads. It's about, and it might be that you need to speak to somebody outside of your family or your close-knit circle, or it may be that you can speak to somebody in work and get that support and help.
You've written The Burnout Solution so that everyone can check you out. Your name is Siobhan Murray. Just lastly, this move by Bumble, briefly, good idea, not that helpful because people will now expect another one perhaps in 6 months' time. What do you say?
I think of course, it's acknowledging that people are burnt out. I think it could be a little bit of a sticky plaster. I think there has to be a more sustainable way of all companies now looking after their staff, because people will still go back in on Monday morning. They still have their work to do that they didn't do last week. And, 5 days work off isn't really going to solve the problem. I think it's a nice gesture, but there needs to be more.
Siobhan, I've enjoyed speaking with you. I sense we'll talk again on similar matters. Siobhan Murray, author, psychotherapist and burnout strategist, which I must admit, going in, I thought, but having spoken with Siobhan, I think probably learnt a lot. She's written The Burnout Solution. Sue in Hillingdon, what do you say about Bumble's idea, Sue? Good morning.
Well, I've just come into work at Hillingdon Hospital and I heard you saying about it, which is fair enough, but what about the NHS staff, the care home workers, the Tesco staff, all shop staff? Sorry, I shouldn't have named a shop.
No, don't worry, that's fine. There are many others.
The shop staff. I mean, we've been in it. I work in an office. I'm not on the front line, but even working in an office at the NHS, supporting the dietitians who I work for, it's been awful. You at the start of the pandemic, you went in queues where doctors and nurses were taking breaks, queuing up for free food, sitting against the wall with their heads in their hands. I mean, having guard of honour.
We can't give the whole of the NHS a week off, though, can we, Sue?
No, we can't, but...
Do you think you're burning? And this is not critical at all, and honestly, and I can understand it, it's been a pretty trying 15 months or so. Do you think you're burning out?
I work in an office, so I'm not on the front line, so no, not
burn out in an office.
I do feel it has been stressful, I can't lie. We've gone back into the office and had tears when we've done guard of honours for colleagues that have passed away. But I've just seen people working around the hospital. I've seen my daughter work in a care home. We are all burnt out. And no, I know we can't all have a week off, but I don't know. I just, walking into work, I thought I really needed to just say as it is for the NHS staff and that. And I don't know what the answer is because we can't all have a week off.
No.
But we're not out of it yet, and the NHS staff are just in my eyes, angels.
Oh, indeed. And just a word, because, Siobhan, they're linking the two stories, this idea of runaway recovery, where you go off for a week or 2 weeks with your loved ones and you just sort of recharge. That, of course, is because we can't travel at the moment, if we're fortunate enough to be able to travel. That's fueling it as well, isn't it?
Yeah, because we can't get away and take the breaks and relax, and, it is. It's just an awful time at the moment, and... I just think sometimes the NHS staff, I don't know, working in the hospital, I just don't feel they're as valued as
they might be. Well, they don't get the applause on a Thursday night anymore. Sue, thanks for that. We'll have more of your calls on that, and also on restrictions. Andrew, we're going to be speaking to you about that. Also, coming up in the next hour, many of you, not just puzzled, actually infuriated by the rulings as regards COVID and football, the Scottish team that were able to select from virtually everybody, the English players, 2 of whom I think still won't be training with the main squad, 22,500 people dancing around Wembley, 60,000 on the way for the semis and the final, but you can't have any dancing at your daughter's wedding. How does this all come about? Media Minister John Whittingdale.
We are talking to UEFA about allowing VIPs or people associated with the teams to attend, but they won't just be allowed to sort of roam around Britain freely. I mean, they will be coming in to attend a match.
How will they be checked? You're not going to tag them.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
10 to 9 on June the 23rd. Why on earth is Nick saying the date again? Because 5 years ago to the day, if you're old enough, you'd have been off to the polls to vote on a seismic issue, whether Britain would Brexit. I don't need to tell you, of course, what the result was, but shall we look back at those 5 past years? LBC's political editor Theo Ashwood works out what's unfolded since that date that goes down, for some in infamy, in others, history.
Ladies and gentlemen, dare to dream that the dawn is breaking on an independent, united kingdom.
It was the most seismic shift in post-war British politics. The impact, immediate.
But the British people have made a very clear decision to take a different path. And as such, I think the country requires fresh leadership to take it in this direction.
That heralded a new broom to clean up the debris.
Brexit means Brexit, and we're going to make a success of it.
But with a majority of only 15, Mrs May knew she wouldn't get her deal through Parliament.
At this moment of enormous national significance, there should be unity here in Westminster. But instead, there is division. The country is coming together, but Westminster is not.
Her election plan went badly wrong. and the Brexit wars began.
And why are you not serving your constituents who voted to leave? Your constituents voted to leave. Why are you not doing that, Anna? And you're going, Anna, why?
I think Parliament will be paralysed and gridlocked, and the only way in the end this is going to be resolved is putting it back to the people.
Mrs May lost 3 crunch votes on her deal. By the 4th, she was gone.
I do so with no ill will, but with enormous and enduring gratitude to have had the opportunity to serve the country I love.
The Tories started the search for a new leader. Most were sceptical the deadlock could be broken.
Wife said, you're never going to get these 3 huge bags of rubbish in, and I was tempted, like Michael and like Dom, to say, believe in the bin, believe in Britain, right? It's nonsense.
Boris Johnson won, and he started by picking a fight with pretty much everyone.
The court is bound to conclude, therefore, that the decision to advise Her Majesty to prorogue Parliament was unlawful.
My job is not to be a cheerleader for the executive branch. My job is to stand up for the rights of the House of Commons.
However, his tactics worked, and the Tories secured an 80-seat majority. That meant we could finally leave the EU.
4, 3, 2, 1...
The PM then had 11 months to secure a trade deal, which he did, just.
A deal that will protect jobs across this country, a deal that will allow goods, UK goods and components to be sold without tariffs and without quotas.
Brexit, of course, hasn't gone away. The effects are still being felt, particularly in Northern Ireland.
The issue, there's no problem with our sausages or indeed our chicken nuggets. The issue is there is a peculiar quirk in EU law.
Theo Usherwood reporting, looking back at the past 5 years. We'll look forward, possibly, to a summer full of holidays, although it's looking a little doubtful, possibly, until late July, August. Andrew in Ripon, what do you say, Andrew? Good morning.
Well, never mind getting in chronic stress. I'm absolutely blazing with rage this morning, Nick, first-time caller.
Thank you for coming on. How long have you been listening, sir?
Oh, my goodness, probably 12 months, but I've refrained from calling because I've kind of gone with the flow, but it's got too much this morning. With 60,000 people going back to watch football and my events industry absolutely in tatters, and my British manufacturing business in complete pickle, then, you know, I have every right, I think, to say my piece. So we're Bishop Sound, and we manufacture speakers for live performance. This is what makes us dance, what makes the bands play, what makes us happy, which gives us our respite, and gives the nurses and the doctors respite, because it gives them a chance to sing and dance and play. So with Notting Hill cancelled, Kendal Calling cancelled, with the MPs and all the Sage people on their full salaries, we sit here 16 months in lockdown with no income, completely excluded with our 3 million colleagues, not being able to export because Brexit is a complete car crash. So whilst we get massive support from the Department for International Trade, and they're fantastic people, our hands are tied as British manufacturers. This country is going down the pan as far as manufacturing is concerned, and I am furious.
Had COVID not been invented by the Chinese, how would your business be faring now?
We were growing at 144% annually. Our business would now be turning over in excess of £2 million. As it stands at the moment, me and my wife are on universal credit. We've sold all of our chattels. We have nothing left. We're living on fresh air and thankfully a few clients that are buying a few little bits and pieces. Unless we come out soon, the events industry, the weddings, the live bands, the musicians, the kids at school learning to play musical instruments will have all lost the will to live. That, having spoken to 3 people that have also got friends who have committed suicide, I am not comfortable of where we are presently. And as for Dowden and Whittingdale and their cronies, and Mr Sunak with his £250,000 swimming pool extension just going through planning, they have no sense of fairness in my eyes.
Can you put a figure precisely on how much you've lost?
Probably in excess of £500,000.
The country comes back to some form of normality next month. You hopefully start trading, bringing staff back on the books. Talk to me about the impact of what Brexit will mean then.
Well, as many of your callers have said over the last few months, Nick, getting things out of the country sensibly into the export market is a mess. We won't go into detail on that, but our plan is to shout from the rooftops about British manufacturing, British quality, British durability, British reliability, and tell our customers around the world that we are here and we are open for business, and ask them to please place an order. If they do that, we might just come out with some shape of a business that's going to be sustainable for the future.
Lastly, you mentioned you had some friends or colleagues who'd taken their lives. Were they in the events industry, Andrew?
I took a call one day from a very sad guy, and I just happened to say to him, "Are you okay?" He said, "No, I'm not okay, actually. My friend, who lives in East London, 19 years of age, came home. His girlfriend said she was pregnant. He went out into the backyard and he took his own life. He was a DJ, a producer, a record producer, a young man who did not deserve to go through this. With no hope, no money, no future, he took his life." That was a very sad call and a very sad day for me.
Of course.
And these DJs, there's only 50% of the DJs left. They're in a complete mess because there's no weddings. We all know the story. But we must, at all cost, save the events industry and save this industry's manufacturing and this country's manufacturing. Otherwise, we're going to look a very, very sorry state.
That's one of the most powerful calls I've taken in some time. Andrew, all I can say is, this is where, unfortunately, there are no words invented. All I can say is good luck, which is so fatuous. But I earnestly hope the situation changes for you. Andrew, thank you. It leads into our next call. This issue of burnout and the staff from Bumble being given a week off. Scott in Reigate, do you think you're experiencing burnout? Scott, good morning.
Good morning, Nick. How you doing?
I'm all right, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll agree with it, to get some time off, but I can't see it happening at all. What say of
How has it
Bumble,
been for you? What do you do for a living, Scott?
I'm a chef by Nick, and I was talking to your producer, I think, and
Yes.
So I was furloughed for just over a year, so I didn't work for just over a year, and a friend's mum just said, she's a nurse, she said, just watch out, because people are going back to work and not realising, how much it affects your body. I sort of took it on board, went back to work, and God, Nick, honestly, it nearly broke me the first 3 days, maybe. Oh, my legs were hurting, my feet. Yeah, it really took it out of me. Took it out of me.
How are you now?
Sorry?
How are you now?
Yeah, no, I'm not too bad now, Nick. I'm just trying to hold it together, really. But compared to some people, like your previous caller, it's tough out there. It's really tough.
Well done to you. The importance of taking that time off, and as a chef, you've had a very, very rocky last 15 months or so, haven't you? Enjoyed our call. The music, Scott, means we must move on. I'd love to support you longer. Give me a call early next time, and we'll have another conversation coming up after the conversation moves to this idea of these bubbles for the dignitaries visiting Euro games at Wembley. Government Minister John Whittingdale.
Well, we are slowly moving to relax the restrictions.
But how are you going to keep 2,500 VIPs from Italy in a bubble?
They won't just be allowed to sort of roam around Britain freely. I mean, they will be coming in to attend a match.
Plus, remember this.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be able to say to you, welcome to Channel 4.
Which is now for sale.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Nick Ferrari at breakfast.
Good morning, it's 4 minutes after 9 on Wednesday, June the 23rd. These supposed bubbles coming the way of Wembley as the Euros continue, but just how fair are they? They can have 22,500 people hugging each other at Wembley last night, but you try and do anything like that near for your wedding, your son, your daughters, your grandchildren, whatever it might be. We'll get back into that story. Plus, 1 in 10 children now absent from school, self-isolation wreaking havoc with education. are, in some instances, they're taking too many precautions? And what does it say of those restrictions? And possibly for sale, the television company, now nearly 4 decades in existence. It's had some hits, such as It's a Sin, Countdown, and... that is, of course, Gogglebox. It's also famous for shows such as TV Scrabble, Naked Attraction, and...
The embarrassing illnesses doctors are back in business. They'll be out on the road taking their clinic to the people and tackling embarrassment wherever they find it.
Yes, embarrassing bodies. For heaven's sake, it could be for sale. But what do you make of Channel 4?
Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
That was a damn clever idea, Gogglebox, wasn't it? Such a simple idea, so brilliantly done. But that's later in the hour. OK, if you were listening in the first hour, you know that John Whittingdale, who is now a minister in the relevant department of culture, media and sport, with this plan that VIPs for the final matches of Euro 2020, i.e. the semis and the final, will be allowed in so-called bubbles, around 2,500 VIPs per match, under strict agreement only to go to the football? How on earth would they police that? They're meant to fly in and out on the same day, while those who stay probably do so for one night in hotels that will be specifically booked for the tournament. How much confidence do you have in that? And also, as I mentioned just a moment or two ago, if you can have 2,500 people from Hungary and 2,500 people from Belgium and 2,500, you know where I'm going with all this, France, what does that say about our restrictions when you, possibly, are having to limit the number of people at a funeral that you might have to attend? I put some of these points in the first hour to Government Minister John Whittingdale.
Well, we are slowly moving to relax the restrictions. So last night, for instance, we allowed 20,000 people to attend at Wembley, subject to proof that they'd either have vaccinations or negative tests. We're going to expand that number for semi-finals. It will go up to 60,000, still subject to those requirements of demonstration that people are not positively tested. And we are.
But how are you going to keep 2,500 VIPs from Hungary or from Italy in a bubble?
Well, if they come here, and we haven't reached any final decision about numbers, we are talking to UEFA about allowing VIPs or people associated with the teams to attend, but they won't just be allowed to sort of roam around Britain freely. I mean, they will be coming in to attend a match, they'll be having to stay in a designated place, go to the match, go home again. So, I mean, there will still be restrictions, but you know, we are in the position where we are able to slowly relax. As I say, we're going to significantly increase, I mean, by 3 times the number of people able to attend those matches.
But you can dance around in Wembley with total strangers, but you can't dance at your daughter's wedding. Or indeed, you still restrict the numbers at funerals. It's not joined-up thinking, is it, Mr. Whittingdale?
No, I completely understand people's frustration, and I want people to be able to dance around at weddings and go to the theatre as much as anybody else. But, you know, this is a careful programme.
John Whittingdale explaining it. You'll hear from the former Chief Executive of the FA, Mark Palios, in a moment. But first to Jane Moore, who, of course, is broadcaster and columnist for The Sun. It's the reason to buy The Sun every Wednesday. Jane is there today. While she doesn't write the headline, she writes the piece beneath it. Blow the whistle on restrictions for everyone, Boris. Why are you saying that, Jane? Good morning.
Good morning. Well, it's pretty obvious, isn't it? I mean, it's pretty much what you just said yourself. You know, right at the very beginning, it was all, you know, we are all in this together. And now we quite clearly are not. And, you know, if you are an official for a big money sporting event, you get to fly into this country. But if you're Mrs. Scroggins, who hasn't seen her family abroad for the last year and a half, maybe 2 years, you have to stay put because the government are not allowing you to fly. So the optics of it are really, really lousy. I have no issue at all with football fans enjoying the event, but not whilst people are having to still have restricted weddings, not being allowed to use their common sense. I mean, a friend of mine is going to her uncle's funeral this week, and half of the mourners have to stay outside because of social distancing restrictions inside the venue. This is now a nonsense. It doesn't make sense, and it doesn't look good. And I feel that Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, has sort of had the country on his side with all of this, even when there have been obvious mistakes. Nobody knew what they were dealing with here. But now, from the G7 summit, everybody flying in there, to now football fans sort of, marauding around central London, whilst the rest of us are being held back with what we want to do, is just not on.
Some would say, Jane, that the number of infections are increasing, the number of children being sent home from school is increasing. We have to keep this situation, otherwise we could risk another wave. Jane?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because, I think they said today now 9 in 10 adults have herd immunity now against COVID. We are going to have to live with this virus. It's not going anywhere. There's no such thing as zero COVID. So the figure that we have to concentrate on is deaths. Deaths are low. Everybody who's willing to should get their vaccination. And, although it's a tricky subject with regarding children, I will get my youngest daughter vaccinated, because it's not actually about the child themselves, who will be at very low risk from getting serious symptoms. It's about protecting the greater public. Everybody knows that. We should now be allowed to use our common sense and get back to living, because believe me, there is a mental health crisis coming around the corner if they do not. If another summer passes us by without being able to do all of the things that everybody, needs in life to be able to have good mental health.
Jane, I will leave you there. Always good speaking with you. Check out Jane's column in The Sun today. Jane Moore, of course, broadcaster as well. Listening to that, Mark Palios, who was chief executive of the FA, is now chairman and owner of Tranmere Rovers, and indeed used to turn out professionally for the club as well. How real do you think the threat was from UEFA, Mark, that if you don't let us come to Wembley, if you don't sort out these bubbles, we're off to Rome or Budapest? Morning, Mark.
Morning, Nick. Yeah, it's an interesting conversation on the basis that, I'm not a medical health expert, but I think that UEFA's threat was probably real. I think that it's quite interesting to see the fact that the government have now allowed 60,000 people in Wembley, because in the game of chicken almost, you're now turning around on UEFA and saying, well, look, we've got 60,000 people now, so do you really want to take the final away? Because it will be a great event if you've got 60,000 people at Wembley for the Euros final. But I think that the unfortunate thing on this is the optics, because it looks inconsistent with what's going on in society, as your previous guest has been saying. But equally, when you just look at what happened and the way they dealt with the two England players, and then you didn't see the Scotland players. So there's lots of inconsistencies around this. And I keep saying it, but, people get bored with it. It is a pandemic, and therefore there's no right or wrong path to anything. I think the timing is difficult. Because on the one hand, the government was seeing a surge in the Delta variant, and on the other hand, they've set this deadline of the 19th, the 19th of July, when the final is actually on the 11th. And so, it is they've positioned this as part of the events research program, which actually, on a positive construction, means that if this comes off and there isn't a surge after the final, and again, I'm not an expert in this area, but it just seems common sense that, you then start to really have a green light,
yes,
to open up society again. And my understanding of the rationale for the delay has been around getting more people vaccinated, but along that path, this opportunity has arisen, and I think it's a good opportunity for the game. I understand the frustrations that people have because it's inconsistent, but it's very difficult to get something that satisfies everybody and still maintain what is the overriding consideration, which is caution as regards the health of the nation.
Just finally, on the point of inconsistencies, and you touched on this briefly, as regards selection, the point that the Scottish team, bar the player who had COVID, were available. To my understanding, two of the England lads are effectively still on the bench at the moment. They'll have to train alone, not train with the main team. How fair is that interpretation as a football professional to you, Mark?
Well, I can understand again, within the bubble of football, the frustrations that are there for someone like Gareth. On the one hand, he has two English players who, people from the outside looking in would say, well, how could PHE decide that teammates were not exposed to a guy with COVID, as opposed to two guys who in the tunnel had a conversation for 20 minutes? But technically, that's the rules and that's the definition that PHE has, and UEFA have applied the local rules in every country. So, they are the rules that they're trying to adhere to.
Always good speaking with you, Mark. Thanks. Mark Palios was Chief Executive of the FA, now Chairman and owner of Tranmere Rovers, and he's played for them professionally too. OK, Simon, you'll be the first caller on that. Also, coming up later in the hour, an extraordinary body of work for Channel 4. 39 years in existence. It might be 40, actually, I don't remember. No, 39. It's 39 years in existence. Making shows such as Big Brother, which, like it or loathe it, was an absolute groundbreaker. Plus... Take a while to get there, guys. Might have come in a little later. Here we go. Stand by your beds. This is what should have come in. There we go. It's a sin. We got there. Responsible for that. But also shows such as TV, Scrabble, and...
In this dating show, we go back to basics.
Are you ready? Bring on.
And start where a good date often ends. Naked.
Naked Attraction. The only celebrity show I'm prepared to do. No, I'm only kidding. No, I know. Just honestly, enough.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Call 0345 6060973.
Simon, coming to you in a moment. Just try this on for size, and thank you to Steve. You've made me aware of this. Yesterday, as if I need to repeat myself, 22,500 people dancing around Wembley in a stadium that takes 80,000, or probably a shade over. This weekend is the grand final of the rugby union at Twickenham. Capacity 82,000. 10,000 people allowed in there. Initially they wanted 20, they've had to cut it to 10,000. So 10,000 this weekend. It was 22,000 on Tuesday night. And in the semis it'll be 60,000. You think UEFA leaning on them has some... You really don't think that UEFA baring their teeth? The argument is, should the British government have said, up with this, we're not put... OK, go to Rome. All your luck. Simon and Bracknell. Simon, you're on the radio. Good morning.
Morning, Nick. Thanks for taking the call.
Not at all, sir. Thank you for calling me. Wouldn't have a show without you.
It was really about the inconsistency of the rugby.
Ah, right. OK. Oh, so were you... Ah, OK. Were you going to go? That's interesting, because... Right. Were you going to go this weekend?
I am going. I'm lucky to get tickets, but there was there's 10,000 allowed at Twickenham, but out of that, there are 5,000 supporter tickets available. So that's two English clubs, Exeter and Harlequins, 2,500 tickets allocated per club.
Now, normally you get 82,000 people in Twick, because I'm fortunate enough to be a debenture holder if England ever return. Normally, what would the allocation per club be? 15,000, 20,000 per club?
It's going to be around that. I mean, being a Harlequin support, we've only got to the final once before, we got tickets.
Yeah,
I'm really lucky to get tickets for this weekend.
Yeah,
I know a lot of people that couldn't. Obviously, the social distancing and everything else, and we all understand that. But for the rugby to be treated so differently to the football, when there will be 60,000 fans 9 miles up the road in Wembley, I think you're right. I think this is UEFA baring their teeth.
And it's the government backing down, isn't it?
Yeah. That's all it seems to be. I mean, I have to travel through my work.
What do you do?
The restrictions... we work in engineering.
Right, OK.
But I've had to travel to Holland on a fairly regular basis up until the last 2 months.
Mm.
The paperwork, everything we have to put together to travel, and our work's in the essential supply chain, so it's deemed as necessary work.
Mm.
But to find out that people can come from wherever, because UEFA have said it's okay, and they're going to be in special bubbles, etc. Is this going to be like the special barbecue bubble on a beach?
Yeah, 38 people. What do you have to do to satisfy them that you can get in to the stadium at Twick? Do you have to go with tests, or do you have to go at a certain hour? I know at Wembley you sort of have an arrival time, don't you?
Yeah, well, I'm still waiting for further details, but I was lucky enough to go at the game at Ashton Gate the weekend before.
Right.
And the same as if you go to a game at the Twickenham Steep Harlequins ground. You get an allocated time to turn up.
Yeah.
Everything's very much regimented. You can't stand around and have a drink. You have to go to your seat. You have to stay